Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we are jumping into the Fifth Doctor era once again, and we're going to examine the Arc of Infinity. This was the first story of season 20 of Classic Who. It's one that in both it's in terms of Time Lord Gallifrey stories, it's a bizarre and at times, I think, unintended link between the three Doctors and the five Doctors. It's strangely related to both anniversary stories.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. I just find that I'm not really saying that as a bad thing. I just think it's really fascinating that it, like, obviously intentionally links itself to the three Doctors, but
yeah.
then
But
so
then you've
many
got the
characters
Russo
from this
showing up.
happen. Yeah, but then so many of these characters happen to rock up in five Doctors as well.
Mm.
I'm sure that's just by nature of the 20th anniversary story being heavily Gallifrey related.
And we've got the return of Michael Goff to the...
Return of Michael Goff, who plays his second antagonist role in this show. He played the Toymaker in the first Doctor era. He's now Councillor Hedden. We also see President Barusa and the Castellan, who both will appear in the Five Doctors as well. And this is also the story where Colin Baker shows up as a Time Lord commander to later become the Sixth Doctor. What is happening with this cast? I kept watching it and I saw Colin Baker rock up, and initially I was shocked, but then I was like, oh no, that's right. He did play a Time Lord before this.
What's the joke that the BBC has, like, 10 cast members that just keep getting rotated?
Yeah, I want to talk about Colin Baker initially, because
Sure.
There's not a lot to say. Like, he's playing this role like someone who is making the most of what they believe to be the only chance they'll ever get to be on Doctor Who. And it's not a role that gives him a lot of like big emotive stuff to work with. He's essentially just the strict Time Lord soldier who's following orders and is skeptical of the Doctor.
Yeah.
Like, it's a
I
role...
mean, he's having a lot of fun, which is...
He's having fun. It's a role that doesn't require much of him, but it's also a role that, unfortunately, it fits a trope that we've seen in this show a bunch, so, it's not... You know what I mean? Like, it's not a hugely standout role until he becomes the Sixth Doctor, at which point this character becomes so fascinating, because we now know that to a certain degree the Doctor can subconsciously choose what their next face looks like. They're never aware of it, but, he became the 12th Doctor so he could look like Caecilius from the Fires of Pompeii, to remind himself that he should never stop trying to save people. He becomes his old face in the 14th Doctor so that he can go rediscover the people that mean the most to him, and he can, spend some time with them and focus on himself.
Yeah.
So why, in his next incarnation after 5, does he choose to take the face, again, subconsciously, of the person who tried to execute him?
Maybe he's like...
I see. There are 3 possible reasons for this, in my opinion.
Maybe he was just tired of playing the sort of... I don't know... not defenseless, but kind of slightly more passive attempt at a nice guy role, and decided, oh, okay, I'm going to be an arrogant you-know-what, because that's kind of who Maxwell is. And it's also weird how similar the performances are. Like, not entirely, obviously, because Maxwell's all about authority, and the Sixth Doctor, like all Doctors, have a disdain for it, but there's such a...
There is a strange parallel, and that's one reason that I put forward. The reason is sometimes the Doctor does tend to, like, go the full polar opposite with who they previously were.
Yeah.
Second reason...
That tends to be the pattern, right?
Yeah. The second reason I put forward is subconsciously the Doctor is like, I mean, it was delayed, but I've finally been executed. I'm going to become my executioner now. And the third reason, it's not even that deep. The fifth Doctor just went, I actually think that person was beautiful, so I'm going to become them and keep that view of myself. Oh, now I'm finally beautiful. Aren't I just amazing? I've got an ego now because I picked the most beautiful face I've ever seen.
And combined it with the most hideous fashion choices
Mhm.
you can imagine.
Um, yeah, look, I don't want to talk about it too much because it is something that ultimately means very little, but it is just something that we can't
Yeah.
you can't help but talk about when discussing this story. That it's the first, I think, time ever that an actor has appeared in the show before becoming the Doctor himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of any other moment where something like that would happen. You got sort of a little bit of it with Anthony Ainley taking on the
Mhm.
appearance of the King of or Lord of Traken, but certainly
And
not
of
with.
course, you also have in the chase where old mate plays a random guy and then becomes a companion in the same story.
But in terms of Time Lords, really, the only example of that happening before was with the Master and the Keeper of
Sure.
Traken, and certainly nothing with the Doctor. So
Yeah, sure.
it's still, and obviously not that they knew this at the time. It's not as if, I mean, I assume no one thought, oh yeah, the dude who played the arrogant tool of a guard, that's our next Doctor. Let's get him in. I doubt that anyone was thinking about that at that moment. But it is still just kind of interesting to look back on it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But in terms of the actual story itself, Omega's back from the 10 Doctors, the 10th anniversary special, the 3 Doctors. Um, and I did look it up. This is his next immediate appearance in the show prior to this point. Like it goes from the 3 Doctors directly into this. There are no prior appearances.
Yeah, yeah.
So we don't miss anything out.
Hmm.
The Omega was seemingly destroyed by antimatter, I think, or became pure antimatter or something like that at the end
Because
of the
he
Three
sort of
Doctors.
destroyed his own world, and
That's right, yeah.
yeah,
Um, but then obviously we set up in this that as like the founder of Time Lord Society, the person who discovered time travel and all this stuff, like this person is just a higher entity now and has become more powerful than we can know, and so has found a way to spare themselves and their reality by hiding out, I assume, in the Arc of Infinity,
yeah.
which is this
That's one of.
sort of sort of like
Mm.
I think of it sort of as the same as like the uh uh like San Andreas fault kind of thing, where it's this sort of like this curve between the dimensions, like this strange like sort of like radiated point where antimatter can be shielded.
Mm.
Um, like so, I imagine if it was a concept that was brought up in modern Doctor Who, they would sort of the Arc of Infinity. It's where reality meets the void. It's one of the few tears in our dimension that link it to the void and all other dimensions. I assume, like, if it were introduced in a modern lens, that's probably how it would be described.
Mm. I think one of the issues I have with the story is I wanted a bit more explanation as to how exactly Omega survived, because I can
Yes.
imagine that,
Uh,
like, he, as you say, he is this powerful, almost eldritch being. But and there is a decent amount of lore to imply that he could just survive, and obviously when he tries to sort of meld with the Doctor, that makes sense as to how he manifests in this
yeah.
universe. But I don't know. I just wanted a bit more clarity on that particular point. Um, if they were going with oh, he is just sort of an eldritch being, who are we to, uh,
Mm.
you know, question the power of Omega? Um, I think they could have done more
You know,
than what they did
I'm
here.
I'm looking up his. I'm on TARDIS fandom now, and I'm looking up the timeline of Omega. Let me see. Gains the Time Lords. Okay, here we go. So, okay, so there are apparently a few stories in between the Three Doctors and Arc of Infinity, all of which are in uh, like the extended media, mainly in prose.
Yeah.
Um, how does it say? So, here's I'm reading from the fandom now. When Omega lashed out, he knocked the force field generator to the floor, causing the recorder to make contact with the floor and creating a violent matter-antimatter explosion. Excuse me, which seemingly killed Omega by collapsing the antimatter world. And then the next paragraph is this: having survived his encounter with K9's former master, Omega plotted vengeance on the Time Lords. He learned how to capture space. It doesn't say. It just says he survived it. Even in the extended media, they don't really give any details about how he survived. That is, of course, from a story called K9 and the Time Trap.
Yeah, of course.
And in between then, he has an encounter with the Sixth Doctor in a story called Search for the Doctor, and then we have Arc of Infinity. And at the end of Search for the Doctor, here's what it says: the Doctor was freed, and Omega was defeated before his plan could be completed. It doesn't say if, it's all left pretty vague, which I don't have a huge problem with, because for me, I'm happy enough with the explanation of he's powerful, so he got out, because I link it back to the Master, where it's like the Master's been killed heaps, and anytime they try to explain how he's managed to survive or come back to life, it's always stupid. So like I said, like he becomes a snake monster after being executed by the Daleks. There's the weird potion ritual in the End of Time Part 1. It's dumb. It's really out of place in Doctor Who. I'm happy enough with just he had a way out. I'm happy enough with that, especially for Omega, someone who purely existing of antimatter. Like he could probably have found a way, like as his universe was collapsing, just duck into the void and exist within the arc. I'm happy enough with that as an explanation.
I suppose. Maybe it's just because there isn't quite as much established history as there is with the Master, whereas,
Sure.
as you say, like if the Master keeps coming back, it makes sense. He's just one of those characters. It might be dumb, but, I guess as Who fans, we sort of accept it. But I think,
Sure.
like, your point on Omega just having that sort of power, that does make sense, and it's not something that certainly not something that ruins the episode. I wouldn't even say it's one of the weaker elements in the story, but it gives me pause for thought. Let's put it that way.
Something that I want more of an explanation for is how Hedden was able to learn that Omega was alive inside the Arc of Infinity and contact him in the first place to set up this big return. That's something that we never learn about. We just learn that Hedden is a believer in Omega and, wants to restore Omega so that, in Hedden's view anyway, he could, continue to guide the Time Lords as he once had, not really knowing how insane Omega had become trapped inside his own antimatter universe.
Well, I mean, I can't remember exactly if they talk about the Matrix in The Deadly Assassin, but is it established in any way that all Time Lords have some kind of link to the Matrix, even if it's not on the same level as the President? Because if that's the case, maybe that's how Omega found him.
I mean, it could be, but we're also told that only the Lord President of Time Lord Society has the the standing to access the Matrix in the first place. So I don't know why Hedden would have been mucking around in there to begin with. But the other thing is, yeah, it's just we don't know a lot about the Matrix. It's it's just it's a foundry for Time Lord knowledge, obviously.
Yeah. And even then, like so when the doctor is the doctor, he's in the Matrix after he gets apparently terminated, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah. So is it like a like I know it is established that he doesn't actually die, but is the Matrix, is it like a weird afterlife thing? Is it a like a
I don't think it's an
purgatory
afterlife thing.
thing?
I'm pretty sure it's not an afterlife thing because,
Hmm.
like, the fact that the Doctor ends up in the Matrix after supposedly being killed is something that astounds and shocks the Time Lord. So
Yeah.
it's something that Omega was able to do through his connection to the Matrix.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know, like I'm sure there's a reason why Hedden would have been able to like discover Omega using the Matrix, but the fact that we never get told that's the reason behind this entire story happening, especially because Hedden is set up as one of the Doctor's older friends.
Yeah.
You know, I just needed a bit more from Hedden and his backstory.
Yeah. No, that's
You know,
fair.
why was he poking around in the Matrix? You
Because
know,
it's a whodunit, and we
why does
needed
he
a
believe
twist
in
villain.
Omega? Why was he so keen on, essentially framing the president in order to get Omega back? Why does he not believe in the president? Like all this other stuff.
Hmm.
Hedden for me is, and it's a shame because Michael Goff is in this, and I like Michael Goff a lot, but he's just sort of like a secondary antagonist and not a good one in a way that has been fleshed out enough, like
Yeah.
to where you can believe him. That being said, I do like one of Hedden's stronger moments is when he jumps in the way to save the Doctor from being shot. That's one of the few things in this where I was like, oh, they were old friends.
Hmm.
Oh, this isn't just an evil character. This is someone who's just misguided in their aspirations for Gallifrey. This is like it happened right at the end of episode 3, and it was a small part of it in overall, but it was a big moment for Hedden's characterization that affirmed a lot of the stuff we were told but not really shown about him.
Well, I wonder about that. Isn't it? I thought that the purpose of that sacrifice sort of play was a bit more shallow, because I assumed it was simply to keep the Doctor alive because Omega needed the Doctor alive. Like he says, yeah, find a way to still keep him alive. If the Doctor's not there, then then Omega can't rejoin the universe. I thought that was the main motivation
I
behind
mean,
it.
it could have been, but I also did kind of read it as this. We're told at the beginning why the Doctor specifically was chosen.
Mm. Mm.
Are we?
Well, I thought you were statement.
No,
Uh,
I'm asking.
yeah. Sorry. No, I don't think. I mean, yeah, I don't think we're explicitly told. Like, there's maybe an implication that, oh, the Doctor and Omega, they're kind of enemies, so isn't it fitting that uh, Omega should target the Doctor? Actually, I've got a feeling. I have a feeling something was mentioned about it early on. I just can't remember when or where that was.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit weird.
Either way, like it could have been. It was probably a combination of the two things at the end. Like
Mm.
the thing that I noticed more, I don't know, because like with the context of episode 4, it probably was that he was just trying to spare the Doctor so that Omega could fully take on his form.
Mm.
But in the moment, I was more like, okay, this is playing into stuff we've already been told about Hedden, but hasn't really come up. To me, that was more present at the time, but I can. Yeah, I don't know. This is more of the whole. I wish there was more characterization we got from Hedden as opposed to just being
Yeah,
a twist villain, because like we're having these genuine confusions about who
yeah.
he is and
And
why he did what he did.
there's nothing wrong with that sort of ambiguity in a character, but you are still sort of missing an opportunity if you're not going to really emphasize that ambiguity and make the audience think, oh, was he just doing this to protect Omega, or was it a genuine sort of uh, decent kind of sacrifice play? It's not really explored that much, and with Hedden, you kind of just get the feeling that he's there mainly to be a twist villain. Like he's being very sort of kind to the Doctor early on, and they establish that's because they're sort of old friends, but that's mainly just to throw off the scent. Um, So I kind of share your frustrations in that, as interesting a character as he could have been, there's a lot more they could have done with him.
Yeah, I've got a few weird details about the production of this story.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I wonder whether the shooting in Amsterdam was because the BBC got the time and the budget to travel over there. It's like, well, we're
Okay, so
incorporating this.
they did actually shoot in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Um, where apparently crowd control was rough. Like they apparently it's had a rough time of dealing with like onlookers in this.
Mm.
Um, where is it? The return of Omega was kept as a big surprise, obviously. But the original storyline didn't involve Omega at all. Um, the original storyline involved the Doctor suffering nightmares about his regeneration, which were actually a precursor to the arrival of an entity called the Avatar, who takes on the Doctor's form and goes to Amsterdam. Operating there as Neiman, the Avatar begins to take control of human minds, striving to create a form in which it will be able to permanently maintain its existence. The Doctor and Nyssa discover Neiman's plot when they land in a future version of Amsterdam, which is populated by robot guards called Sweepers, the elderly Resistors, and barbaric Anarchs. Realizing that history has been altered, they travel back in time to present-day Amsterdam. There, the Doctor discovers that Time Lord regeneration is the mechanism by which the Avatar is made manifest. The Avatar is defeated when the Doctor relives his own recent regeneration.
That's weird.
It's weird, and it would have added weird things to like the lore regarding regeneration that would
Yeah.
have been confusing, I think. So that might be why Omega's inclusion in this, they don't explain much about why he came back, because that was never the original intent of the story.
Yeah. But it sort of simplifies the whole thing, because the whole him needing to sort of, take over the Doctor's form, in conjunction with what we already know about Time Lords and Omega, I think it seems simpler than what you just described with the possible alternative plot that the story could have had.
Yeah. Also, regarding Amsterdam, they were allowed to film there as long as the story didn't involve drug smuggling, prostitution, or diamond or art theft. and and speaking of prostitution, while visiting Amsterdam's red light district along with the cast and crew one evening, Janet Fielding was approached by a man who had mistaken her for one of the city's prostitutes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
fun for Janet Fielding, or fun in the extremely ironic sense.
good lord.
Speaking
Yeah,
of, sorry, you go ahead.
I was. I feel like that the Amsterdam bits, they feel a bit disjointed. Even bringing Tegan back, because the thing is, she had seemingly left the show in the previous story at the end of Time Flight. As to exactly why she came back, or whether it was meant to be a permanent departure at all, I'm still not quite sure about. Um, but yeah, the whole Amsterdam bit, I get that it's meant to be a contrast to the Gallifrey bit, but it just feels very disjointed to me. Like they make it work well enough, and I like the idea of it, because they're underground below sea level, and that, you know, Omega needs the right level of pressure to make his mechanism work, and that works fine enough. But
Mm-hmm.
you really get the impression that it was a matter of opportunity and convenience. It's like, oh, we're filming in Amsterdam, quick, let's do a thing with the plot that has stuff
Yeah,
and
and Amsterdam being
Amsterdam
it's on
stuff.
the curve. It's on the curve of the arc as well as
Yeah,
the other
yeah.
main big factor. Yeah, like it is one of those things where, especially early on, it does feel very disjointed, but by the end, you're like, oh, okay, this came together well enough.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, it doesn't really, like, given how odd those two pieces fit together, the whole thing doesn't really fall apart, I don't think.
I do wonder if it would have not just been simpler to say that Gallifrey is on the curve of the arc, and that's why Gallifreyans are so in tune with the Matrix and and time and all that stuff, because it is on a slightly weaker point in the universe. But that, and also, like, in general, with does the arc of infinity counter or account for rotational orbit and gravitational pull?
You'd think it would.
It
It sounds
must.
like something that would be covered. I mean, it's obviously not brought up, but
I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know.
it's weird, but it could have been worse.
It could have been worse. Yeah. So Tegan in this story, I was for a long time very confused as to why she wasn't there. I had a look in the timeline. I was like, no, this is well before Resurrection of the Daleks when she leaves. So I had to look it up. In the previous story, which I think is Time Flight, she did depart the TARDIS. Only to come back immediately. Was this a situation where Janet Fielding wasn't sure if she wanted to stay or come back? Or did she leave in Time Flight specifically so that she could have this separate plot for a moment in this story?
I'm genuinely not sure. Yeah, I really can't answer that question. It's a very strange
Well,
thing to do.
I'm gonna look at Time Flight now very
Sure.
quickly. The story notes and the production notes. Oh, apparently, a lot of people have disdain for Time Flight.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard it hasn't got a great reputation.
Great. Let me see. Apparently, it took several hours for the production team to decide if the title of the story should be hyphenated or not, which...
Weird detail to
it's a very weird
to agonize over.
Okay, it's a myth. Apparently, it's a myth. The reason Tegan gets written out is because Janet Fielding's contract expired, and so Arc of Infinity got rewritten when the contract was renewed. There's nothing to corroborate this. I can't find anything else about why she leaves and then comes back. So it's just a thing that they did.
Yeah.
Maybe to resolve the Tegan's waiting to go to Heathrow storyline. Maybe they just did that for that reason, so that she could stay with the Doctor on a more permanent basis afterwards. That might have been why. I don't know.
Could have been any number of things. I mean, Doctor Who has, I think, done as stranger things as as that in throughout its history. So
yeah, certainly
could have been worked in more smoothly or thought ahead a bit more. Sure, but it's not terrible. I don't think.
Yeah. It's okay. So Nissa's the main companion for this story. And look, we've seen a few stories with Nissa in them now, and I still don't really feel like I know who she is.
Yeah,
she's from a future. I think she's a bit more intelligent than other companions have been.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's the daughter of the Keeper of Traken in the Keeper, because that's when she shows up.
But I don't know. I don't feel like she's very interesting to talk about. She always seems very one note.
Yeah, I mean, this story kind of has some of the most in-depth character explorations when she's sort of trying to defend the Doctor, but even then, it's not a lot.
None of it seems particularly unique compared to what other companions would have done in that situation. Like, we don't really get to see how Nissa brings her own, like, unique perspective or expertise to all of it. It's just sort of like, this is what the companion does.
And even if you look at, like, Adric or even Tegan, their character arcs, particularly in their final stories, have more impact than I think most of what we see with Nyssa, I actually can't remember what story she departs in. It might be one of the chameleon stories. But anyway, yeah, she's not. Even I think by Doctor Who companion standards, there's not a lot of nuance to her character, which is a bit frustrating because I think there's potential there. But I don't know. There's just kind of a missed opportunity, I suppose. And I know, I'm sure other people have said it. I can't remember whether I heard, it might have been Verily Bitchy who said that her characterization wasn't particularly deep, but either way, I think the evidence kind of speaks for itself. She's not the deepest character, even by Doctor Who companion standards, and it's a shame. With that said, she's okay in this story. I like the bit where she's defending the Doctor and sort of arguing with the Time Lords, I assume knowing that that's a pretty risky thing to do. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a lot to say about her, if I'm honest.
No, I agree. And it's really unfortunate as well because you would think that this would be a really good chance to give Nyssa a big spotlight. Like she's technically the only companion for a lot of this. But then they give a lot of the more interesting stuff to Tegan in this again. Like it's Tegan who is investigating her cousin's disappearance without the Doctor being there and resolving that side of the story for a lot of it.
And communicating to the Doctor and taking that risk of giving her location.
She's also the one used as bait by Omega to try and get the Doctor to comply.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of the more traditional, like the plot progressing stuff is done by Tegan, and it's also a lot of great character stuff where we get to see in a post-Doctor, or at least she thinks at the time, post-Doctor world for Tegan, she's still like, she's taken what the Doctor has taught her and she's applying it. She's, standing up for people. She's going out there. She's being proactive and doing good in her own right. It's good to see.
So that when I can't remember whether it was Colin or his friend, when he says, oh, you're never going to believe this, she doesn't say it, but you almost get the impression that she's going to say, oh, well, try me, because
exactly.
It's not as if she hasn't come across her wacky antics by this point.
Mm-hmm. Certainly,
and that's kind of great, really. And they don't. There's no beating around the bush there, right? There's no. I guess we got to try and convince Tegan to believe him, but no, they don't need to do that because we know who this character is.
No, yeah,
which is pretty good. Yeah.
I like the way that this story characterizes Time Lords as well, especially the High Council.
Yeah, that drama is the most compelling element, I think, in this story.
It is, but also you look at a lot of these characters come up again in the Five Doctors, and a lot of the roles are completely switched. The President Barusa in this one is not really an ally, but he's very, very complete. Like he's helping the Doctor where he can.
Yeah, he's pretty benevolent.
Benevolent towards the end, especially, is trying to help out. And then the next time we see him, full on immortality-seeking, power-hungry, maniacal man. The Castellan in this is skeptical towards the Doctor, but in the next time we see him, treats him more friendly, I guess, from memory, and is the tragic figure who is set up as the evildoer by Barusa, clearly taking a page out of the playbook of someone who previously did it to him. I just love that in between this story and the next, we see how completely fickle and changeable the upper class Time Lords can be to suit their own needs.
Yeah, it's a very aristocratic society, and it's good that it.
Yeah, and it's made
that it sort of needles that, I guess.
And it's also it's front and present in both stories as well. It's something that is incredibly obvious to not just the Doctor, but anyone who watches Doctor Who to even a small degree. But I just don't think they would lie, though.
Yeah, it's weird. Why would they do that, Cuff? I mean,
it's so strange. Yeah,
it's not like they've had a long history of doing that for their own personal gain, and it's not as if the Sixth Doctor would have to go on a massive rant saying how corrupt Time Lord society is and how they're worse than any of the other species the Doctor's come across. I mean, it's just a little I don't know. It's a little weird, a little odd.
Yeah,
But yeah.
it is strange, isn't it?
Mm. But more seriously though, it is
It
really
just
good.
sorry.
Sorry.
We've been calling that out for what it feels like has been like since the very start of this
Yeah,
podcast.
it's
It's like we made
basically
it really
that
simple.
and Doctor Who, was never political apparently.
Yeah,
Those are the
but
basically two
yeah,
memes in
but
our
also like
show.
it kind of feels like we've been sort of looming over this Timeless Children review for a long time now. Like we're slowly building up towards it. We're still so far away from that in terms of the podcast. We have
And we haven't
so
even
much to get through before we get to that storyline.
and we haven't even talked about all of the instances of Time Lord corruption throughout the show leading up to
Hmm.
that point, right?
No, yeah.
So
We haven't even discussed how, in the wake of the Time War, the Doctor has a very, very clear impression of who these people have become.
hmm,
But why would they
yeah,
lie?
yeah, their decadence and greed and
Hmm.
and
You know, it's
their
amazing that some
vanity.
people still defend that era of Doctor Who.
How do you mean?
Some people still stand by it. They say it's good.
The show.
Yeah.
Sorry, help me out here, Cuff. Are you joking a little bit there, or am I
Oh
just?
no, like look, the show has its fans. Like
Hmm,
era of the show, there are a lot of people who say no, it's not as bad as you think it is. Like it's fine, it's entertaining, it's fun, it's good. People say that, and granted, there are also people who say, "Oh, woman, they ruined
oh
it."
yeah, yeah. I
So
mean,
it's nice that we have. It's nice that it balances out in some. It doesn't really balance out. I guess I probably shouldn't say that. It's not one opinion is definitely worse than the other,
yeah,
but like yeah. Anyway, Peter Davison, he's great in this.
yeah. He's pretty good.
I do wonder why he was so confident that the execution wouldn't work. Like, do we ever get an impression from him that something's going to happen,
Um, I
or is
don't
he just
think.
sort of? So
I think.
if we accept that he didn't, it is weird that the Doctor is just so like resigned to. Well, this is the only way it can be. I
Although
on
no,
the other hand,
there is that moment though, doesn't he? Like he says, he's sort of saying in a coded way to this, of like, there's no escape. I know what I'm doing. Um,
well, that would have
hmm,
been if we had gotten something in the next episode where the Doctor shows up in the Matrix and is like, "Ha, I knew it." Then I'd be more along the lines of that. But it almost reads to me more like, A, this is going to stop whoever is trying to enter the universe in my form from taking over, and B, by doing this, I'll be able to save Nissa. So in that sense, it is very in character for the Doctor to do that.
hmm.
If he like was truly like, okay, the Time Lord bureaucracy is preventing me from doing anything to
And
prevent
my
this that
friend's getting
won't
caught in the
also hurt my
crossfire.
friends in the process. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So in that
But
sense,
then
I
it,
think okay, fair enough.
but it also kind of makes sense for the Doctor to do sort of a 4D chess move. That's something that they've done a lot before and since. So,
I suppose, but again, he looks very surprised when he winds up in the Matrix. Granted, he looks
mm, yeah.
very floaty when he rocks up there as well. But
Well,
like
maybe,
there's no real sense of like, ah, I see.
maybe there is a suspicion where it's like, because he knows that a Time Lord would have to have gotten access to his, data files. He can suspect that there is sort of a grander plan to this. That
Oh
whoever's
yeah,
doing
maybe
this must be powerful, and they're not just going to let the Doctor be destroyed if they want to use him as a vessel to sort of
that's true.
manifest in the
Yeah,
universe. So
but again, like it would have been nice if he'd communicated that in some way.
yeah, like it's ambiguous in a way where it doesn't hurt the story terribly,
No,
but if they were going with a 4D chess thing, it would have been nice to sort of get that confirmation, I guess.
yeah. I mean, something I also really appreciate is just that moment when Omega materializes in the form of Peter Davison's Doctor. Like it's something that
Mm.
is set up properly, but when it happens, you're like, oh shit, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is good. I even the I don't know what they would have done, but the effect of when they're actually standing in opposite each other and staring at each
Hmm.
other is really quite exciting. And I also love it's a small thing, but the way their facial expressions and even the way their hair looks in that
Yeah,
scene, it really
yeah.
just demonstrates how different these characters are, even if they look exactly the same. It's pretty good, actually.
And I like that the first thing that Omega does upon gaining physical form again is just catch a show in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
He's just sort of taking it all in. He smiles at a child. It's like off-putting, but it's not menacing.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like, oh, I've got my life back. And then the second he starts to like rot again.
Yeah.
You get that, once again, sinking sense of, oh no, I know what we should do. Let's run around Amsterdam for 10 minutes.
But there's still
way too long.
The bit where he catches the show, there's still enough sort of humanization going on there to make it pretty compelling, especially given how late that happens. I mean, that's basically the last half of episode 4.
Yeah.
So I admire it. Whether or not it works,
I think it works.
Sure,
I think it works until there's a full 10 minutes of just running around the streets of Amsterdam with not a lot else said. It drags on a bit by the end, where it's like, okay, we get it. He's being chased. He's slowly degrading. Catch up already.
Oh no, where's he gone? What's that, Mr. Dog? He's over in the alley?
There are like three or four separate occasions where they lose him, and then either a person falls over or a dog barks.
Or someone screams or something.
Someone screams, exactly. Like, there are like three, 4, even 5 separate occasions where that happens. All to lead up to the Doctor shooting Omega once being the resolution. It's not particularly strong as an ending.
I will also say, I think something that struck me a little bit, and I guess it makes sense, but the Doctor was very quick to judge Omega. Like, there's a bit where he just says, he's a maniac or something like that, and I'm a little bit torn because on one hand that does make sense because we know who Omega is and we know that the last time we saw him he did become a bit of a megalomaniac.
Yes.
But I feel like that the Doctor, certainly by this point, would be more willing to give second chances to people, and it makes sense in the end because Omega definitely reveals that he is still a megalomaniac, and there's that bit where the Doctor kind of almost gives him a chance. He's like saying, "We know, we've never hated you, Omega, or we didn't want to destroy you, and I can choose to either trap you or destroy you now." But there's some point in the timeline of the story where he jumps straight to, "Ooh, evil, icky, get him away." That I just
think that's fair enough.
I think
that's fair because the two things the Doctor knows. One, he is trying to steal my body to enter this universe. That's one thing, and he doesn't want that to happen. The second thing is, okay, once that becomes unsuccessful, any form of him entering this universe will eventually cause a decay that will lead to antimatter touching matter, and a massive explosion.
Yeah,
that is what the Doctor's trying to prevent. That's the
doesn't he establish that? Yeah, there's some sort of big cataclysmic event, and then Omega kind of just
going to happen. Yeah,
just turns into an almost like terrible self-destruction, where it's like, oh well, if I can't live here, then no one can. And,
yeah, that proves the Doctor right as well, where he knows, based on his previous encounter with Omega, he knows, oh, okay, this is a person who, if their plan fails, will, in bitterness, take the universe out with them. He'll will his own death into existence to destroy matter.
Yeah.
This isn't a situation where, like, any way you look at it, the Doctor is right. Like, this isn't every member of the Ice Warriors is a soldier thing, and it's not a, the Thajarians are all killers situation where they assume a prejudice based on limited knowledge of a species. No, this is someone that they've had remember 3 times, because there were 3 Doctors there. 3 times they learned about how evil and crazy Omega is. It's pretty fair to be like, no, we'll trust your judgment on this one, buddy.
Yeah, I guess so. Anything else I wanted to bring up?
I just think it's for me, it bears repeating for me. Like, when the Omega reveal comes in, it's like, oh damn, yeah, hell yeah, Omega, I love that guy. He was so great in that previous story. And then when he takes over the Doctor's body or like takes his form, you're like, oh shit, Omega's back. And then like you get to see Omega do this like really like the humanizing Omega moment, and then the next 15 minutes are so goddamn boring.
Because he just
Like
turns into a weird-looking goblin man.
it's not
For
just
the
that, but like again, it's the chasing him around
mm,
Amsterdam, the
mm.
okay conversation that they have, but then the resolution just being the Doctor slowly assembles a gun and shoots him once,
I
causing him
mean,
to
I kind
teleport back into the antimatter realm. Like you're telling me that we spent all that time chasing Omega through Amsterdam and not like properly writing, scripting, and staging this conflict between the two that has been building up over all this time since the Three Doctors.
I mean, I'll say
Like
this.
this is what you choose to do with the character.
I kind of like what they're trying to do with that plot element, or at least what I think they're trying to do, because it shows that despite how powerful this character is, now that he's finally manifesting, he's losing all his power. He's you know dived into the deep end. He's bitten off more than he can chew, and he's actually just kind of a very weak, sad creature. There's a tragedy there, and I quite like it. If that was the point,
But
there would have to be a better way for them to explore that. Because as you say, there's a lot
well,
of
that's
time
my
where they're
point
just
as well.
running around Amsterdam looking for
Yeah,
this decaying person.
look, at a certain point, the idea can't save the execution.
No, yeah, and that's the point. I admire what it's trying to do, and there's even small moments like the fact that he does have that, let's take in a show bit where it's kind of hinting at
That
that
bit's great.
tragedy. But then it just, as you say, devolves straight to, "Ooh, catch the monster! There he goes. He's down that alley. Oh, look, he's scaring the old lady. Let's,
Wouldn't it have been great if they had any exchange, like especially with the Omega taking the Doctor's face?
mm,
If they'd made like, and this is not very subtle of me to say it this way, but if they'd made a point of, I was once like you, Doctor, if you keep going, you'll become like me, you'll become this like, godlike figure who thinks they can do anything, and that would have
you either
inadvertently set up the Time Lord Victorious pretty
you
effectively.
either you either die a Doctor or you live long enough to see yourself become Omega.
But that's what I mean. Like, there are so many different and interesting things you can explore
Mm,
with this like one of the most important figures in Time Lord society taking the
mm.
Doctor's face,
And he was a
and
lot more interesting.
especially with how the Time Lords talk about the Doctor initially, with like you
Yeah,
can't do this to the Doctor, like
mm,
and even before he becomes this like key figure in the Time War, the
mm.
Doctor is known on Gallifrey. Like he's a
Yeah,
person
he's a
who
known
all the High
entity.
Council are like, that's the Doctor, man. You sure you want to do
Mm,
this? Like,
mm,
so that could have been a key thing of like, do you think I was like, I started out a normal Gallifreyan, just like you started out a normal Time Lord, but I
mm.
like, I sought ambition beyond my species, just like you're doing, running around, not just observing time. You really think we're that different, Doctor? One bad day is all it's going to take. Obviously, again, like none of that is particularly subtle, but you have Omega take the
There's
Doctor's face, and you just
yeah,
squandered it.
yeah. There's that element of duality which is certainly not explored, really. I think, or barely explored in
No.
this story. And the fact is, I think um, Omega is a much more interesting character in the Three Doctors because he's got that.
Mm,
Like he's a megalomaniac. Let's be very clear about that. And the fact that he's
yeah.
been alone for so long, he's clearly been driven mad. But he's still got kind of a note of sympathy about him, even the bit where he's kind of screaming in the end, realizing, it's all over. There's something kind of tragic there. And even his sense of betrayal at the
Yeah.
Time Lords, there's some nuance there, and even the sort of, I mean, it doesn't last very long, but even the almost friendliness he treats the second and third Doctor with,
Yeah.
here he's not as cartoonishly villainous as other Doctor Who villains, but he's still very much veering into um, sort of villain of the week, um, which is unfortunate, and certainly it would be frustrating, I think, if this was your first Omega story. Not just because there's a
Yeah.
previous story, but the fact is, his characterization is handled better in the Three Doctors.
It's
Um,
very much so. Yeah.
it's just a bit of a shame.
Mm.
I want to go back to
That probably is another symptom of Omega not originally being the main villain of this story and
yeah,
being a different thing.
yeah,
But like I said, like at a certain point, idea means nothing when we have execution.
yeah. I want to go back to just Time Lord Society for a little bit because
Sure.
I do that for me is the most compelling element in the story. In those first, I think, 2 parts where you've got all the back and forth between the Doctor and Nyssa and Barusa and the High Council, there is something really interesting about that because it demonstrates, I think, the problems in a lot of similar, aristocratic, you know, power-based systems where you don't get the impression that these people, the High Council of Time Lords, that they're, super malicious or anything, but purely by the rules that they govern themselves with and the fact they need to save face and that they feel a duty to be this sort of weird universal Praetorian guard keeping everything, safe. Um, in other words, purely by the institutions that they've propped up, it inevitably must compel them to these very immoral ends. And I
Yeah.
think there's a really interesting quality there because it maintains their humanity, but it also underlines the tragedy. So that when you do hear why would they lie, well, this is why, because they've ruined themselves and they've corrupted their society, and through a combination of how much power they have and their slightly warped sense of duty, they feel they have to, keep everything safe and take
Yeah.
these radical decisions. And
To the
yeah,
point of like executing an innocent man without
yeah,
considering other alternatives. Yeah,
yeah.
very much so.
So yeah, I find that again probably the most compelling element in the story for me, purely because of that sort of thematic depth, which frankly is more thematic depth than we get in most of the story when you think about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I think that's just by the nature of it being Gallifrey.
yeah, you always kind of expect
Yeah,
heavy
like
stuff.
Gallifrey stories are stuff that the classic era could do, but rarely
Yeah,
did. And I think
yeah,
that's that for good reason. I think like
mm,
you do a Gallifrey story, you got to put the time and effort into doing it right.
yeah,
Which, and it's a shame to say, I don't think that Revival Who has done it yet. I don't think we've had a
mm,
good, with the possible exception of the 50th anniversary special. I think that's the one that did Gallifrey, like a story partially at least set on Gallifrey, the most good, because like it's not in good company, because apart from that we have Hellbent and The Timeless Children,
mm,
both of which are grade A stinkers. And I think those are the only stories actually set on Gallifrey in Revival Who. So like,
mm.
like
Yeah,
not
it's a bit
not
of a
good
shame.
company. Not good
No,
company.
no, not
Um
really.
uh, but
Yeah,
anyway, yeah, it's great to see Classic Who doing stuff with Gallifrey and really like knowing the Time Lords and doing
yeah,
justice to their moral bureaucracy.
mm,
It's one of the
yeah.
main things that fascinates me the most about like just Gallifrey itself, and the way that there is a distinction between Gallifreyan and Time Lord that
Mm,
rarely comes up in discussion. It's just always just Time Lords, Time Lords. But I think
yeah,
in Classic Who isn't it established that Gallifreyans are the native species and Time Lords are the upper class?
yeah. There's a reference to Leela in this story, because
Yes,
at
there
the
is.
end of the invasion of time, which was the last time the Doctor was on Gallifrey, um, Leela left and she went to live with, uh, to put it one way, the other half of Gallifrey. Right? They're like,
Yeah,
from memory, they're like a group of people. So yeah, so it is, as you say, seeing that dynamic or that contrast between, um, the haves and have-nots, so to speak, on Gallifrey is quite interesting.
and
Um,
it's something that rarely comes up in Revival Who
yeah,
as well, which is
yeah,
again I think something that has muddied the waters between what is a Time Lord. It would be nice to see any of this stuff rectified in a future story, like a good Gallifrey story in Revival Who that firmly establishes Gallifreyans and Time Lords as separate entities, but
I
it's been
mean,
destroyed for the second time now. So
is there
bringing it back
anything?
again, would be
Is there
cheap.
anything in Hellbent that explores that, or
We do see, again, for lack of a better term, tribal Gallifreyans before we see Time Lord. Like, we do see a distinction between the two uh,
Hmm.
living situations, and also in the episode Listen with Peter Capaldi, when we're briefly shown a glimpse into the first Doctor's childhood, there is a
Oh
line
yeah.
indicating like something like he'll never make a Time Lord, which just sets up that distinction, which I think is like the only time that Revival Who has
Hmm.
really like a firmly established the difference. So it's nice to
Right.
hear that there.
Hmm.
But otherwise, they're just all called Time Lords.
Right. Fair enough.
But yeah,
So
like I agree that that Gallifreyan stuff is really a big strength of the first part. A lot of the Amsterdam stuff before we get to the end and where it all comes together is mainly there as like a okay, Tegan's it's fun to see Tegan doing stuff, but also like how is this connected?
yeah.
And then when it does connect, you're like, oh, okay, that's neat. And then episode 4, in my opinion, good start. It goes off the rails very quickly, and that's my assessment of the story. It's got good bits, it's got bad bits. It's mostly enjoyable until it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair.
And what score would you give Arc of Infinity?
Uh I think I might give it a 5. Um I like the good stuff here, but there's just kind of too much that makes it disjointed, and not even in a, the chase, Deadly Assassin kind of a way, because it doesn't have. It's not utilizing the wild sense of adventure and imagination that you have in even fairly flawed Doctor Who stories. So
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, I think
I'm
a
giving it a
5.
5 as well. And I was going
Yeah.
to give it a 6, but then the more
Mm.
I talked about the ending, the more annoyed I got. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair.
5 it is.
Mm.
Okay, next time we will be jumping back into the end of season 3 with the sound of drums.
I'm pretty keen for that. I
We've
remember
got
it being a
a
really good story.
we've got a an unintentional Time Lord uh, theme running through the back half of this season of podcasting.
Hmm.
We'll see if that continues with the other classic stories we do. Might not, might do so though.
And if you thought the words Doctor Who and Anne Widdecombe can be used in the same sentence, well, I've got news for you.
Until we get there, I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz. And
and
he's got control of the Matrix. Ooh.
why would he lie?